Hello everyone, so you might be someone who's searching for the new weapon inside a Steel Path, or you might be a new player that wants to get into Steel Path but your weapons are completely doo-doo and or your builds. So in today's video, me, your lovely host the Gaming Weasel, have 10 different weapons, primaries, secondaries and melee weapons to use inside of Steel Path for any level player. Some will be a little bit difficult to get, some mods will be a little bit difficult to get, but if you want to go in Steel Path, you want the best possible loadout that you possibly can get. So, Eximus units, Thrax units, Eximuses, and what are the third ones called? Acolytes, yes, there you go. Acolytes are gonna be basically no issue for you. You're gonna be 2-shotting them, 1-shotting them, 5-shotting them in some situations, but I will basically explain everything once the weapon comes up. Of course, a disclaimer, number 10 is not worse than number 1, keep that in mind. I know I'm still gonna see those comments in this comment section below, but of course I did put a disclaimer just so you know. Of course, there are plenty of weapons in Warframe that are incredible and amazing in all 3 of the weapon types, so primary, secondaries and so on and so forth, but of course I cannot put them. I don't want to make a top 50 because then we're gonna be here for at least 2 hours. So without any more dilly-dallying, let's get into number 10. At number 10, we actually have 2 weapons of the same type, and those weapons being the Praetos and the Cronin Prime. These 2 weapons are both Tonfa's weapons, both have great critical chance and critical multiplier stats, dealing primarily slash damage, and also combined with viral and a great primer, these 2 weapons will shred through anything in Steel Path. Of course, the main difference between these 2 weapons is that the Praetos is an incarnate weapon, allowing you once you reach 5x combo multiplier to turn it into an incarnate weapon, or I guess into its incarnate form, with a heavy attack, and for 90 seconds you will get a range increase of 2 meters, an attack increase of 40%, and you will gain a 20% bullet jump bonus if the weapon is held in your arms. So pretty goddamn good. And honestly, I would, and that's why I did put these 2 weapons in the same slot, because they're pretty much the same, but it is dependent on playstyle. For example, the Cronin Prime for me is much more favorable just because I've grown to love the Cronin Prime. I have been using the Cronin Prime for almost the longest time. It's still an amazing weapon, was back then, still is now, and the Praetos, as I said, pretty much the same weapon, the main difference being it's an incarnate weapon. Now, as we all know, incarnate weapons do of course have their certain transformations and incarnate evolution. So for the first one, of course, we're gonna unlock the actual incarnate form, then second one 20% attack speed, then the third one is gonna be 15% initial combo, then the fourth one is gonna be at 3x combo multiplier, you're gonna gain your, of course, incarnate form, and then the last one is gonna be heavy attack wind-up speed increased by 100%. Now, personally, I've tried out a couple of different builds for this. This is actually personal preference. These are the ones that I like using. You can definitely change up the evolutions, but in my honest opinion, these are my ones that suit my playstyle the most, and I think are gonna suit at least 80% of the players, of course, player base says playstyle. Now, we do want to talk about mods as well. The mods for the Praetos are pretty plain and simple: Sovereign Outcast, Blood Rush, and of course Condition Overload. We do have Berserker Fury, which I honestly think is going to be pretty good, but is not necessarily needed. We do have Weeping Wounds, Prime Fever Strike, Vicious Frost, of course Viral as always, Organ Shatter, and Volcanic Edge. Now, keep in mind, I do not use Smite mods. Smite mods are incredibly good. If you have them, and if you have, for example, the Prime variants, definitely use them. They're going to be incredibly good fighting the faction that you're, well, fighting, and increasing your damage. I personally don't use them, but that is a definite, I guess, thing that you can put on your weapons. For example, you don't need Volcanic Edge, well, put a Smite mod inside there. And of course, the Cronin Prime build. Pretty much the same build, but we put Prime Fury and Reach instead of course, Volcanic Edge. And also, I think, instead of Corrupt Charge, no, I didn't use Corrupt Charge, but nonetheless, we do have those 2 mods. Basically, equaling the playing field between these 2 weapons, because with Prime Reach, we get get range, Prime Fury, we get the attack speed, so we're pretty much here somewhere. But as I said, in my honest opinion, I really do love my Cronin Prime. Nonetheless, this has been the 10th weapon. Pretty plain and simple, just get your primer. I use the Epitaph in this situation. You can use the Kuva Nukor, Standard Cyclone, Cedo, whichever one you want. This weapon is going to shred through anything. Acolytes, Eximus units, anything that you see in front of you is pretty much going to die. I love the Sovereign Outcast, is honestly one of the best stances in my opinion in the game. Incredible forward slashes, you even throw your tonfas in front of you, increasing that range even more. Incredible fun weapons, and just basically you're gonna be clicking E all the time. I think you're gonna get carpal tunnel by pressing E so much, but it is so enjoyable. Nonetheless, that was the number 10 weapons. Moving on to number 9. At number 9, we also have 2 weapons, so basically this is gonna end up being a top 15, but nonetheless, a little bit of a special bonus for you guys. We have 2 of the best, if not the best, primers in the game. It is gonna be the Epitaph and also the Kuva Nukor. Now, with the recent new Arcane secondary encumbered, these 2 weapons became even better at priming your enemies. Now, you can prime these, of course, for condition overload, as you may have saw on the Cronin and Prey as well. Now, you can also prime for primary weapons and secondaries as well, with of course Galvanized Aptitude, Savvy, and of course Shot, which is of course for rifles, shotguns, and pistols respectively, because those mods benefit from status effects affecting the target. Now, you may not know, or you may know, that these weapons are nothing incredible against Acolytes themselves, because Acolytes can receive only up to 4 stacks of any status effect, of course excluding impact, but nonetheless, killing trash units or even heavier units just like heavy gunners is going to be incredibly easy, especially with condition overload. Now, if you don't know what secondary encumbered does, it is basically an arcane that gives you a random 20% chance of applying a random status effect on top of the already existing status effects on your weapon. Now, for the Epitaph, we have a plain and simple build. Pistol Pestilence, Lethal Torrent, Sure Shot, Scorch, Ice Storm, Jolt, Convolution, Anemic Agility, and of course secondary encumbered. Now with this, I think it's electricity, no actually I have Magnetic, Radiation, and Blast on my Epitaph, which is 3 elements, and of course secondary encumbered giving me 1 or even more random status effect if I do get lucky. So you can stack it up to 5 times, which is going to be beneficial, as I said, for your primaries and or your condition overload weapons. Now, how does it actually function for primary weapons? Well, there you go. I'm going to leave you a little bit of a tidbit with the Kuva Heck on screen, how it of course functions with Galvanized Savvy. Of course, you can only stack it up to 4 times, but nonetheless, it is incredibly good because more damage equals more things dead on your screen, and I think everybody wants things dead on their screen. But of course, we have the Kuva Nukor, which, in my opinion and statistics-wise, can be better than the Epitaph. I prefer the Epitaph's quick fire, of course blast radius that it has, and of course the, I guess, recharge instead of the actual reload of the weapon itself compared to the Kuva Nukor. But nonetheless, Kuva Nukor, we have a Seeker, Pistol Pestilence, Lethal Torrent, Anemic Agility, Galvanized Diffusion, a Frostbite, Pathogen Rounds, and Deep Freeze, and of course secondary encumbered. Now, on this weapon, it would be best for you to get Magnetic. I personally don't have it, but I have Electricity, Radiation, and Viral on my Kuva Nukor, which means that is the 3 status effects. Now, the thing with the Kuva Nukor is it has a special and 4th hidden microwave status effect, which also does count for condition overload and also, of course, you know, the galvanized mods. Now, that is really nice. That means you, on base, without secondary encumbered actually proccing, already have 4 different status effects. Combined, that the main IPSs do count as status effects as well, so Impact, Slash, and Puncture do count as, of course, status effects for condition overload. Oh yes, I can guess, and you can guess what that means. Of course, tons and tons of really good and juicy damage. Now, the melee weapon of choice is my Dual Keras Prime. I do take this weapon out on occasion. It is an amazing weapon as well, amazing melee weapon. There you go, that's the 15th weapon in today's list, and a little bit of build on the screen right now that I use. One more thing that I forgot to say, Revenant is going to be used throughout the gameplay, just so I don't die, and that's basically it. I'm not buffing any of my weapons just to make the actual, I guess, testing out pretty plain and, you know, equal around all the weapons. But nonetheless, these two weapons, in my opinion, are the best primers in the game, hands down. Of course, Cedo is still here, but in my opinion, if you want to increase your rifle's damage or just your primary's damage, of course, Akuva, Nuker, and Epitaph are gonna be the option of choice. So, that was number 9. Let's move on to number 8. At number 8, we have, of course, the Cedo, as I just mentioned basically a couple of minutes ago, and this weapon is incredibly good, and first of all, as I said, for making your condition overload weapons, and also your secondary really good with galvanized shot. Now, the unique part of this weapon is that this weapon basically has condition overload built into it, which is very, very nice. It has 2 firing modes, of course, the base shotgun firing mode, pretty plain and simple. The second one, launching a glaive that applies status effects. Now, how does it actually proc status effects? So, the glaive explodes in a 6-meter radius on impact with a surface or enemy and bounces up to 11 times. Now, initial hit and explosion apply status separately, and of course the initial hit has a listed status chance of 50%. And explosion always applies 2 separate procs. These are guaranteed and not affected by mods. First proc is based off of course, the modded damage types, and then the second proc is going to be randomized from, of course, toxin, cold, electricity, and heat damage as well. So, that is very, very nice, and you deal 60% bonus damage per unique status effect on target, which is 24% lower than, of course, condition overload, and the weapon does have really good critical chance and multiplier numbers, and it does primarily, of course, puncture damage, which isn't the best in and of its own, but having this condition overload built into this weapon is incredibly good. Now, because this weapon, in my honest opinion, shouldn't be used as often for a primer as, of course, the Epitaph and Nuker should be, I will only cover the damage build in, of course, this segment. Of course, you don't really need a lot of modded elements either if you're going to be using the, I guess, condition overload perk, or I guess the status applying effect of this weapon. Just apply a couple of them, have 2 or 3 base on your weapon, and then of course the Cedo is going to do the rest. But the damage build of this weapon, we have of course viral as our primary damage, galvanized hell, hunter munitions, scattering inferno, galvanized savvy, of course critical declaration, and primed ravage and primed merciless. Now, you could switch out for corrosive damage. That could be pretty good because, of course, if you don't need a viral combined with your hunter munitions slash procs, it is completely okay. You could completely switch out for corrosive. It is going to be pretty goddamn good. Of course, as I said, if you have a Bane mod, use it. I'm personally not going to use it in this build, but if you do, it is going to greatly increase your damage as well. So always keep that in the back of your head instead of writing it down in the comment section below, because I know some of you are going to do that. So there you go, just a little bit of a heads up. Nonetheless, of course, if you don't like critical declaration for the extra minus 20% attack speed, or I guess fire rate, you could switch this out for, of course, primed, what's it called? I actually forgot what it's called. The blunderbuss mod. Yes, there you go, remembered it. So you can switch it out for blunderbuss if you want to, but I personally don't mind the extra 20%, or I guess the minus 20% fire rate on this weapon. This weapon performs pretty well inside of Steel Path. Of course, it's basically priming itself, so Galvanized Savvy is basically, I guess, priming itself, so that makes it really, really good. Of course, as we all know, Savvy doesn't work on AoE weapons, but this is not counted as an AoE weapon because the primary fire is basically a shotgun firing method. So with Galvanized Savvy here, you're going to be doing really good damage numbers. Always keep in mind that, of course, activate your second, I guess, glaive mode and apply those statuses on the enemies. Of course, this weapon, sometimes even without trying to, I guess, use the secondary, maybe you forget to use the secondary fire mode, you're going to be still doing really good damage. Now, you're not going to be decimating the Acolyte, you're not going to be literally looking at it and it's already gone, but this weapon does really good damage even against the Acolyte. So we do, of course, get a max stack of 40 different elements on an Acolyte. That means 6 times 4 for, of course, that's 240 increased damage, which is of course nothing to scoff at. 240 damage is completely enough and good enough for you, of course, to just use this weapon without any issues and killing those acolytes without any issues. As I said, this can be used as a primer as well, so it's completely up to you, but I love using it as a damage weapon. So that was number 8. Let's move on to number 7. At number 7, we have a weapon that does incredible amounts of critical chance and incredible amounts of damage, and of course the best bow in the game. It is of course the Naughtaruk. The Naughtaruk is simply incredible at dealing damage. 3 different firing modes, of which 2 are sort of and incredibly useful, and the third one just being there, I guess. So let's cover the firing modes first. You have a quick shot, which is basically the worst stats out of everything. Then we have charged and overcharged shots. These are really good stats, I mean critical chance and critical damage wise. But what do you want to aim for? Well, you want to aim for the perfect shot. The perfect shot is when the indicator on your screen gets orange. When that happens, you have the highest critical chance and critical multiplier values, and of course the highest damage values as well. So we have 2 builds for you guys. First of all, one is very interesting, and I think you might not like it, but believe me, give it a shot. And of course, the gameplay will be of this build. And the build looks like this. We have Serration, Primed Shred, Vigilante Armaments, Heavy Caliber, Galvanized Chamber, Critical Delay, Hunter Munitions, and Vital Sense. Now, you might be saying, well, this is a stupid build, why the hell did you building this here? Well, keep this in mind, it does primarily do puncture damage, yes, but when it procs Slash, because Slash is not far off, oh baby, you're gonna be doing incredible amounts of Slash procs. Everything will die in around 1 hit, and if it doesn't die in 1 hit, it's gonna die from the actual Slash procs. Now, keep this in mind, Slash procs are based on your damage itself, so if we only have a primary Merciless, our Slash procs are not going to be as powerful. Now, keep this in mind, increasing our base damage with Serration, Heavy Caliber, Galvanized Chamber, and Vital Sense is going to be very good, because with these mods we get really big Slash procs. Now, what are you, okay, you might be saying, well, okay, that seems pretty reasonable, okay, that's fine, but why the hell do we have Shred? Well, first of all, this weapon has infinite ammo and it has infinite body punch through. That is completely amazing. With critical delay, we get minus 20% fire rate, and that's 2 times for bows. With Prime Shred, we, make that up at least a little bit. Now, we also get to punch through even more. And you may be saying, what the hell is the point if it has infinite body punch through? Well, this allows you to punch through walls, basically, and punch through doorways as well. So you can be far enough away from the door if you're playing a really squishy Warframe, and you can just literally shoot enemies through doors, and that's basically it. Now, if you don't like this, you could put a fire rate mod or just put point strike instead of critical delay. It's completely up to you. I adore this build. Like, I have to say, I really adore this build. Having that flexibility through, maybe let's say you miss a shot a little bit or something like that, you're able to punch through that certain object that's really getting into your way with Prime Shred. Of course, because some of you might not like it, here is the second build. The second build is a little bit more loose, a little bit more normal, I guess you could call it. Hunter Munitions, Malignant Force, Prime Cryo Rounds, Prime Shred, Vital Sense, Critical Delay, Galvanized Chamber, and Termite Rounds. Of course, you could put in the Exilus slot Vigilante Supplies for that extra 5% critical chance, but at the 180% critical chance, I don't think you're gonna need it, but the more the merrier, as they say, and Primary Merciless. Now, of course, what you can do is replace Prime Shred with a faction mod, for example, but then I wouldn't really prefer you use critical delay. I would prefer point strike, because you're gonna be slowing down your fire rate by a lot. So that is dependent on you. For example, if you don't need thermite rounds, place that with a faction mod and just keep Prime Shred, or normal Shred, of course, works completely fine with this build. Nonetheless, this bow is incredibly good. Time your perfect shots correctly and basically line it up as many enemies as you possibly can, and you're gonna be shredding through Steel Path like there is no tomorrow, with the incredible critical stats, with the incredible damage numbers, with the incredible, I guess, fire rate with this weapon, especially with Primed Shred. It is gonna be easy to kill everything. But of course, there are a little bit of a nuisance. Of course, enemies can be, of course, sometimes quite tanky. And acolytes can really sometimes ignore your bow, but most of the time they're not going to, because these amounts of stats nobody can ignore. But nonetheless, that was the Nataruk. Moving on to number 6. At number 6 we have the Phantasma or Phantasma Prime. This is a status freak in Warframe. It is a shotgun weapon that basically fires a beam that applies a decent amount of status effects, and these status effects shred through enemies. I love this weapon, and this weapon is an incredibly fun weapon to use. Now, it's not going to destroy acolytes because of the status cap, but it is going to destroy trash units like there's no tomorrow. Basically, aim, shoot, it's dead. Aim, shoot, it's dead, and continue on. It has a small magazine, but it has decent enough stats to actually cover that magazine capacity, but the ammo runs out really fast. Now, this weapon is not a critical weapon at all. It is basically base damage, fire rate, and status effects. So that's why we made the build to be towards its, of course, better sides. Shell Shock, Toxic Barrage, and Charged Shell for corrosive, Shotgun Barrage, fire rate, Vigil anti-armaments, Galvanized Savvy, Galvanized Hell, Scattering, Inferno, and of course Primed Shotgun Ammo Mutation and Primed Merciless or Primary Merciless. Now, of course, Shell Shock, of course, as we said, Bane mods, you know, faction mods can be definitely changed out. In general, this weapon is very well paired with a good melee weapon, or even a secondary that's actually gonna kill the acolyte. But for any unit, either it be an Eximus, a heavy unit, or trash unit, the Phantasma Prime is an incredible weapon. Basically, as I said, you just have to aim and shoot, and there's not much more to this weapon. I love this weapon, and of course, you definitely should pick this weapon up if you want to shred everything inside of Steel Path. And moving on to number 5. Whilst we are on the topic of shotguns, at number 5 we have, in my opinion, the best shotgun in the game, being the Tenant Orca Plasmor. I simply adore this weapon. It has, of course, a toxin as its base element that I've chose. It does innate radiation and impact damage on its projectiles, which have a 3-meter radius. They have infinite body punch through, and they ricochet off of surfaces. Incredibly good pairing for clearing out anything inside of Steel Path. Of course, for the weapon build itself, we are basically gonna be going for viral and loads of damage. We have a critical, declaration, toxic barrage, chilling reload, the blaze, galvanized hell, primed ravage, hunter munitions, galvanized savvy, vigilante supplies, and primary merciless. Now, scattering inferno instead of blaze, you can use it, you don't have to, and of course, frigid blast instead of chilling reload. I just love chilling reload, making the reload of this weapon incredibly good. I love the playstyle of this weapon. It does really good damage against acolytes and any sort of units that you come across. It's basically sort of a shotgun variant of the Nataruk with much lower critical chance and multiplier stats, but nonetheless, it shreds through enemies. With the infinite body punch through, it does really good damage, and you're going to be racking up kills like there's no tomorrow. It has really good critical chance stats as well. With viral, it does really good damage, proccing slash left, right, and center as well. It does have impact, yes, but with hunter munitions, that's not going to be a big issue. Of course, as I said, put a faction specific mod. If not, you can even use corrosive with this build. So blaze and fire, I guess, combined with corrosive, even more armor reduction, basically reducing enemies to rubble, or I guess basically making them disappear, because this weapon does literally disintegrate enemies inside of Steel Path or anything. I love this weapon when I did and when I do still play the Index, because it's incredibly good. Compare this with any other shotgun in the game, this weapon is just incredibly good. I honestly think that this is the Nataruk of shotguns. It clears out enemies, you don't even have to aim, you just aim in the general direction and the projectile will bounce and hit the enemy nonetheless. Again, infinite body punch through, incredible amounts of damage, really good range and radius on its attacks, incredibly good weapon, and a must pick up if you love shotguns like I do. Well, that was our number 5th weapon. Moving on to number 4. At number 4 we have our favorite secondary in the game. It is the Latham. This weapon is an extremely good gun hose weapon. This weapon base does really good and primarily slash damage with a good critical chance and critical multipliers, which in this weapon's case is actually really bad. But its incarnate form does primarily impact, it does radiation as well on its little explosion, which can be influenced by primed or normal fulmination. And the good thing about this weapon is, of course, that it has decent status chance as well, but we do have a pretty high crit chance and crit multiplier stats as well. And you might be saying, isn't crit chance and crit, of course, damage good? Well, no, on this weapon it is not. Of course, this weapon, like every single incarnate weapon, has 5 evolutions. The first one being that, of course, you unlock your incarnate form. The second one is going to be 24% fire rate. Third one is going to be 30% reload speed for 12 seconds. That stacks up to 3 times. This is really good on headshot, of course. I love this so much. Of course, our fourth one is going to be headshots build more incarnate form, and then the last one is going to be 50% chance to deal 2000 damage on non-critical hits. So we're going to try to bring that up. Of course, I see people use, instead of the, I think it's the third or fourth evolution, use the one that reduces critical chance and increases status chance by 20%. That is completely viable. You can use it as well. I just love building my incarnate form much faster because, in my opinion, the incarnate mode is the better form of this weapon. But that is all up to you. Like almost everything in Warframe, my, of course, builds are not something that you have to follow strictly. You can basically, build your own weapons. Now, the build for the actual Latham is pretty much simple, focusing on status chance and of course damage itself. We're gonna be of course trying to focus on getting as much enemies dead as possible. Now against, of course, acolytes, this is not gonna be the best possible weapon in the game, but one thing that I have noticed is this weapon is incredibly good, if not maybe the second best weapon or third best weapon against Archons. I have used this weapon and I've also used the Fenmore, and I've seemed to be doing more damage to the Archon with this weapon. So if you're going to go and hunt down Archons, this weapon is definitely, in my opinion, the weapon of choice. I personally love the spray and pray of this weapon. Of course, the incarnate mode has a separate magazine to its normal magazine, making it really good, and also you don't have to worry about ammo. Now in your incarnate form, once you start spraying and shooting enemies, it is gonna run away real fast, but with our fourth evolution, building it up is not going to be difficult at all. So the Latham, an incredible secondary, and this is, in my opinion, a must-have secondary for everyone who is anyone or just really loves secondaries. So that was the number 4 weapon. Moving on to number 3. At number 3 we have the Glaive Prime. This is a staple of my kit. If I'm bringing a melee weapon inside a Steel Path, it is going to be this weapon. No enemy poses a threat to this melee weapon. Now, this weapon is not used for normal melee strike, it is used for heavy attacks. Now, once you throw this melee weapon midair, you can do an explosion that has a 4.8 meter explosion radius, applies and forces impact and slash procs, does blast damage, has no damage fall off, and has a base headshot multiplier of 1 times and cannot trigger headshot conditions, so keep that in mind so you won't be getting basically headshots with this weapon. Now, the bad thing about this weapon is the explosion radius. There are better weapons such as the Zorus with a higher explosion radius, but when this weapon hits, it hits like a goddamn truck, and that truck will destroy everything. It's like one of those big American trucks that basically decimates everything in front of it, on the side, and basically even through walls. Now, the weapon is primarily gonna be focused on, of course, heavy attacks. So that's why for the build we have Ashal Twilight and the Aura Volatile Quicker Turn, increasing the radius of the explosion and also making it come back and not bounce. Corrupt Charge, because it does a scale off of course, combo count. So this gives us basically 2.5 combo count without doing anything, throwing it once, and then it always goes up to 2.5 times. Of course, if you use the Neramon Focus Cool and, for example, charge it up even more, you're going to be doing even more damage. Then Gladiator Might for, of course, critical damage. Killing Blow for that extra juicy, of course, heavy attack damage and wind-up speed. Organ Shatter, Amalgam Organ Shatter would be pretty good here. I sadly do not have the mod. Sacrificial Steel, Prime Fever Strike is here for Corpus Shields. This basically bypasses Corpus Shields and makes them basically nothing. And of course, Primed Pressure Point. So, of course, Condition Overload with this weapon is not going to be your best option. Of course, if you're going to go for heavy attacks, which we are, of course, pure damage, critical damage, and critical chance is the way to go. This weapon is so good that if you come across any sort of acolyte that you're maybe having trouble with, your primary or secondary, or maybe your Warframe abilities, you just throw it once or twice, and there you go. The acolyte basically disappears as soon as he arrived, as soon as he is gone. Basically destroying everything. Trash units, oh, I don't want to even talk about that. Trash units are like basically nothing to this weapon. Eximuses might pose a little bit of a problem with their like overshields and everything, but other than that, they're not really that big of a threat to you, because all you need to do is maybe throw the glaive 2 or 3 more times, and then it's basically done for. The Glaive Prime, one of my staple weapons in my kit, and an always a weapon for me in Steel Path because it destroys everything. Throw it, it explodes, it destroys everything, and you are happy, sleeping soundly, knowing that nobody killed you in Steel Path. And moving on to number 2. At number 2, we have a weapon that I think all of us have been expecting. It is the best assault rifle in the game. It is, of course, the Fenmore, yes, our Incarnon assault rifle. If the Tenant Orca Plasmor is the best shotgun in the game, this weapon is the best, and I do mean with a big capital best assault rifle in the game. Of course, an Incarnon weapon, of course, evolutions. Now, what evolutions did I personally choose? Well, first of all, of course, we have the first evolution, unlocking the Incarnon mode. The second one is going to be 20% fire rate. Third one's going to be on headshot kill, 20% chance at the instant reload. Now, there is an evolution here where on depleted magazine, this actually the weapon actually reloads faster, which also increases, or I guess decreases, the actual transformation speed. So that's a pretty good one if you want to use it. Evolution 4, 50% more Incarnon transmutation on headshots, and then the last one, 50% chance to deal 2000 damage on non-critical hits. I have been testing this weapon out with the critical build as well, but this build outperforms that in so many ways, and especially damage-wise in most situations. Now, this weapon's primary mode is going to be a semi-auto mode, dealing primary slash damage with bad critical chance and critical multiplier stats. Well, bad in this weapon's case being of 20% and 2.0. Now, the status for its Incarnon and its base form is 20%, which is really good, and as I said, instead of the 4th evolution, you can use the one that lowers your critical chance to basically 10% and increases your status. That is a good one as well. I just love to, get my Incarnon mode as fast as I possibly can. Now, in its Incarnon form, it does primarily slash as well, with radiation sprinkled just in a little bit. So this weapon can do really good damage. Now, this weapon is not an AoE weapon. It can be used as a spray and pray weapon, but I primarily use this for hunting down Archons. Archons really don't love this weapon, and I do mean they really don't. They just really hate this weapon because this weapon shreds through the Acolytes and the Archons as well, but especially the Archons. Now, you might be seeing in the gameplay that I'm not shredding my Archon, or sorry, my Acolyte. Yes, because I sadly got the one that basically dodges all my bullets. So that's not the best representation, of course, of the Fenmore, but believe me, this weapon is incredibly good. I love this weapon to bits. Now, what kind of setup are we using? Where we're basically using Galvanized Chamber, Vigilante Armaments, Malignant Force, Galvanized Aptitude, Prime Cryo Rounds, Primed Shred, and then Thermite Rounds and Hellfire. Of course, Primary Merciless is here as always. Inside of the Exilus slot, Terminal Velocity would be really good to increase the projectile speed by 60%. And that is a really good because the bullets do have a little bit of travel time, which is completely okay. You don't necessarily need it, but putting in Terminal Velocity will help out the weapon, of course, deal more damage and get more bullets down range. I really do love this weapon. If I need to just go and hunt my Archon, I'm gonna pick Revenant Prime and or Wukong Prime and basically just pick this weapon. It is bar none. I have no other weapons to basically pick, and this is a no-brainer. It is a higher level, I guess, master rank as are most of the Incarnate weapons, but believe me, once you get it, you're gonna be the happiest person in the world that you did, especially because of the evolutions themselves, and of course the build that I've just showed you, combining heat and viral, and also loads and loads of slash. And as we all know, slash and viral basically wins you Warframe. So before we move on to number 1, we're gonna move on to honorable mentions, because there are many and many different weapons in Warframe. In the honorable mentions, I'm gonna put a couple from each category and basically telling you a little bit about the weapons. So primaries, quickly starting off, we have the Proboscis Ceranos. Basically drag enemies in, do loads of status, kill everything. We of course have the Kuva Brahma, which still is relevant nowadays, but you do need a lot of ammo for it. We do have the Convextress, which is basically a slash monster, which I do really like, but it needs a specific mod that costs a lot of platinum for one weapon, which I do not like. We have the Tromna, basically an auto-firing mini Arcoplasmor, but with an old fire mode that one-shots acolytes. We have the Fel Arcs, with of course an Incarnate Shotgun being incredibly good and decimating everything, and of course the Bubonico as well, a shotgun, and also can be used as a primer in the game. So secondaries, we have the Tenant Cyclone, an incredible primer as well. We have the Piranha Prime and the Tenant Plinks, two weapons that I really do love, and I actually made videos on the Tenant Plinks, making it incredibly good against disruption targets, and the Piranha Prime basically shredding through everything. And then melee weapons, we have a decent assortment here. Now we have the Nikana Prime, Dual Carriers Prime, Guandao Prime. These three weapons are really good. The Stropha being the best gunblade in the game. I love these weapons. These are incredibly good. And of course we do have the Zaw weapons. Now I didn't put Zaw weapons inside of the tier list itself because Zaws are incredibly good with Exodia Contagion, and everybody knows that, so that's why I didn't put any in. But nonetheless, those are really good weapons. Of course, we do have weapons such as Dynamic Skyla and also Legion, which can be pretty useful, especially the Legion for newer players. But that was my honorable mentions. I think it's time to move on to my number 1 weapon. And at number 1, we have, in my opinion, the best possible secondary that you can get in the game. It is, of course, the Spore Laser Kit Gun. This weapon is my Acolyte killer of choice. If I were to choose, and if I were to make my quick loadout in this video right now, Fenmore as my primary, Spore Laser as my secondary, and melee weapon Glaive Prime. This secondary, combined with the Glaive, or even alone by itself, is incredibly good. That, of course, parts, because it is a kit gun weapon, is the chamber is going to be the Spore Laser, Loader Splat, and the grip is going to be Haymaker. I cannot tell you how good this weapon is against Acolytes. This weapon decimates Acolytes. It makes them feel like they're nothing. Of course, one of the greatest things, it doesn't have an ammo count. It has a recharge, which is really good, and it can also utilize Pax Arcanes, which makes it oh so better. Oh yes, I love this weapon. Now, if you were to basically use this against enemies, it is still good. It is really good at killing trash units and killing enemies in and of itself, but Acolytes are this weapon's specialty. So we have a build, of course, for the Spore Laser, Augur Pact for the first Smog, Galvanized Diffusion, Prime Target Cracker, Iron Pistol Gambit, Jolt, Lethal Torrent, Pistol Pestilence, and Heated Charge. Lethal Momentum, of course, for the Exilis, Secondary Merciless, and in the Pax slot we have Pax Charge, which basically makes our battery recharge much faster. This Pax Arcane is really needed on this weapon, because without it the recharge of your battery, or I guess your ammo, is gonna be really slow. Now we chose Corrosive because of course baby Corrosive, making that armor weak to us, and of course Heated Charge of course can be replaced with Prime Heated Charge if you do have it. This weapon does really good damage. Now on this weapon I personally wouldn't use a faction specific mod, but you definitely can. I personally wouldn't. I think Augur Pact is really good where it sits right now, but this weapon is an Acolyte killer. Any Acolyte, doesn't matter which one, except the one that drags in your bullets, is probably gonna kill you, but any acolyte is basically, it get weak in the knees when it sees this weapon. It is gonna get basically annihilated, and that is going to be basically it. Now, hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, if you maybe liked the video, maybe didn't like some of the weapons in the list, maybe you disagree, leave it in the comment section below. I'm really glad